This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Track Farms and their excellent CBD. Okay, here's my new thing. I talked about on a previous episode how I've been getting up super early in the mornings. I'm really playing with my sleep schedule right now, so getting good sleep at night is super important to me. It means I need to fall asleep and I need to do it quick. I need to get to some deep sleep. So my new thing is, I've always been a big believer in like melatonin right at nighttime to set your sleep cycle right. And what turns out is that when I combine that with some of that CBD tincture, like I'm talking right when my head hits the pillow, get some of the CBD tincture, I'm falling asleep so quick. You immediately just like anxieties drop, whatever, everything starts working in your body right. I should probably learn a little more about this actually, come to think of it. But it's working for me. So CBD for sleep is my new thing. So go check out Track Farms. They've got the best CBD I've ever had. Track-farms.com. If you use the code STRANGERS at checkout, you will get 15% off. That's track-farms.com. Use the code STRANGERS at checkout and get you some CBD. Ross Johnston, welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited to have you back on Strangers Worth Meeting.
Yes, great to be here. I am so excited. I had a blast and a half last time, so I'm the most flattered that you invited me to come back. Oh my gosh, round two.
Yeah, well, you are legitimately a fan favorite on the show. I have had multiple people tell me specifically about your episode and how excited they were. And I feel like I have something to really live up to today because the last time we met up, so obviously this podcast is all about meeting strangers. So I don't know who I'm going to be talking with. And if I had known the wealth of knowledge that you had about these topics, let's just say I would have come more prepared. I would have come with more questions because I didn't know the extent to which you could just dive in. And I think, I re-listened to our episode just to prepare. And, it came out great. And honestly, I know I pick at myself. This is like my passion and I want to be really a good podcast host. But I'm excited to have like another shot at talking about all of this great underwater science stuff. So, yeah, thanks for being here. And we have a lot to talk about today. You were telling me there's a bunch of articles going on. There's something about this week that made this a perfect time.
Yeah, well, I just think it's also kind of funny to think that it's strangers worth meeting. But I mean, we're friends at this point, so now we can dive into the real nitty gritty, right?
Absolutely.
But yes, you're absolutely right. You picked such a great week to set this stuff up. I mean, there are so many cool science things happening in the world of environmental science, marine biology. And I mean, yes, there's a lot of like really important science out there. And then every once in a while, there's just, wait, this is really cool science. And that, I mean, it's curious to see that there's no such thing as bad science and there's no such thing as like wasted experience or wasted effort. But you always wonder like, what are we going to learn from this versus like, okay, in the moment, this is really awesome. And I feel like this week, there's just been so many cool, awesome, who knows what they're going to benefit conservation-wise down the road. But right now, this is awesome work. So first off, I know that you sent me a text message a while back about the octopus. So we have, and the cuttlefish and the cephalopods and how smart these snail cousins actually are, right? So we have to dive in and talk about that.
Yes, of course. So this was something that was posted. Of course, I'm a Joe Rogan fan, of course. It's super predictable and very boring of me. But he did post about, I think it was about a cephalopod passing the marshmallow test, which is the delayed gratification test. And I did a little reading about it. Actually, I didn't read about it. I made my dad read it to me over the phone because I was too lazy to read the article. But I do get the idea, and like anybody who's watched the 5-year engagement, I'm familiar with the marshmallow test. So I think it's fascinating that we are starting to apply human psychological cognitive tests to marine animals, and I want to know your take on this. This is pretty wild. It seemed like I know your friend, it's Dr. Tracy, right? She posted about it. She was really excited about it. So tell me about this. Tell me more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really funny. I saw that you liked Inspector Planet's post. So for all of you folks out there who are loving science and all the big science nerds, one of my best friends in the world is this incredible knockout scientist named Dr. Tracy Finera. She just left my current work. So she used to work at Mote Marine Laboratory with me down in Sarasota, Florida. And tragically, she just got a job with NOAA or whatever. So good for her. I'm going to miss her. But luckily, she's not too far away. She's just up in Tampa. But yeah, she is an amazing individual, great personality, awesome social media presence. So I recommend following her if you just want to hear more about awesome science. So speaking of awesome science, yes, this cephalopod thing is really cool. So for anyone who doesn't know what's going on in the world or who hasn't had a dad to read the article, this is a really cool
I'm
study.
lucky.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really adorable. So basically what's going on is that there's a cuttlefish. So in the world of cephalopodia, or cephalopods, which is basically the big fancy science name for headfoots. So any animal that has their head literally attached to their foot. So that's squids, octopus, cuttlefish, and then those really cool shelled ones called nautilus, which are like the really prehistoric when you think of like an ammonite. It's like a modern day ammonite with the big curly spiral shell and the little tentacles. These groups of animals are technically, I mean, they're mollusks, so they're loosely related to snails, which is a weird thing to think about. So cephalopods in general, how they break down is that you see like the big snail eyes, like those big octopus eyes, that big back hood-like thing is called like the mantle. And then you notice that it goes like directly into the tentacles. So that's basically what cephalopod is. Their head is like crammed right on top of their feet. Now, I actually just caught myself saying something. It is not tentacles, it is arms. I will be ripped apart by my marine biology friends if I don't correct myself on that one.
Good distinction.
So,
Good distinction.
yes, right. And just like it's not octopi, it's octopuses for all of you folks out there, that it is a Greek word and you do not change the plural of Greek words. You only change the plural of like Latin words. So it's cacti, but it's octopuses. But anyway, looping back around. So for squids, just terminology, squids have 8 arms and then 2 long tentacles. So they have 10 appendages. An octopus just has arms. An octopus just has 8 arms. So anyway, there's one of their other cousins is a cuttlefish. So kind of the way, think of it like evolutionarily, that there's a snail. Snails are at the bottom of the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. There's a few swimming slugs out there in the world. There's a few swimming snails. And then there's the nautilus, which is like the most prehistoric of them. It has the big external shell. Then second from that, evolutionarily speaking, is like the cuttlefish, which has a pretty large shell, but it's internal. So for any folks out there that have a bird, you might have bought a cuttle bone in a pet store, supply store. Well, a cuttle bone is actually the shell of a cuttlefish. Fun fact. So it's not really bone, but it's like a calcium carbonate shell. So if your bird is suffering from like osteoporosis, which is very common when they have to lay eggs or something, because putting that eggy shell from the mother bird pulls so much calcium out of the mom's body that they often have to like supplement it. And chewing on this calcium shell of this cuttlefish is a great way to think about it. Then evolutionary speaking, there's the squids, which do have a shell. It's a little teeny tiny shell. It's really long. It's really skinny. And it's called a pen. So it's one of the fun things you might have done in high school is like dissect a squid. Then you get to like write your name with the ink sac and the pen, which is their internal shell. So that's one of the fun things we get to do with our science students. And then, sorry, I know, right?
That's gross.
Yeah,
that's gross.
super
And
cute,
sorry,
right?
folks. I should have mentioned at the beginning, we have a slight lag. We're trying. So I'm sorry if there's awkwardness on the podcast. Man, I miss doing this with you in person too. It's so much more fun to be in the same room. But we will do that again next time I'm in Florida, I promise. But please continue. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, no. No. This is such a blast. I mean, yeah, you're right. I do miss just the conversation without the leg, right? And then as far as the most advanced, I guess you could say, of the cephalopods is the octopus, which has no shell whatsoever. So they have that little hard bird-like beak, and basically anything anything similar size to that bird-like beak, the rest of the body can just smush into. I'm sure you've seen those YouTube videos of like this giant octopus like crunching down into this long skinny tube. So yes, an octopus really has no restrictions based on shells or anything. So one of the interesting things about cephalopods is that even though they are snail adjacent, they are the first animal in the history of animals to have gotten up off the ground of the ocean, which dramatically changed how they function. It allows them to essentially they're the first free swimming animal because they way predate fishes. They way predate sharks. I mean, way predate any land animal, like, let's be real. So they kind of revolutionized the way of motion in the ocean. So it's a really neat thing to think about that they were the first animal to not be sessile or benthic or stuck on the bottom, basically. But what's really interesting, so anyway, looping back around to this marshmallow test. So for any folks out there who don't know what the marshmallow test is, basically it's a like human kindergarten survey where are kindergartners and just kind of preschoolers able to have future planning? And are they able to assess delayed gratification? Where the test is you could eat one marshmallow now, or if you wait, what is it? I don't know. It was like 130
I think
seconds
it's
or
50.
something.
Oh, really? I've always heard that it was
Okay.
15 minutes. I always heard it was 15 minutes for humans, but maybe that's
Oh,
maybe that's different in this test.
yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know what it pertains to for humans, but yes, that sounds about right. I know the animals that they worked with, I feel like it was like around 130 seconds or so. But basically, it's if you can wait X amount of time, you get two marshmallows that then you can eat together. So it's would you want immediate reward, immediate nutrition, or are you able to delay your gratification in order to get something down the road? Now, as far as animal studies go, this isn't a new thing for animals. So one of the really interesting things is that obviously this is applied to like primates and more like advanced mammals, right? So they've done it with like chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas, and obviously we're primates just like they are. So they got it. There have been a lot of studies with parrots as well and corvids, which are like crows and ravens, which are some of the smartest birds out there. And they have obviously passed this as well. And one of the really kind of just broad, generalized topics regarding this marshmallow test is it's most applicable for animals that use tools. So because they can use a tool, it often takes longer to get said nutrient. However, when their tool is successful, they get more nutrients. So the marshmallow test has always been kind of assumed or paired with tool using animals. That a chimpanzee will use a stick to poke at a termite mound. And then although that takes longer to get the termites, rather than just finding like one beetle here or one banana over there, they essentially have that tool that then opens up the entire termite mound. So it takes longer, but there's more immediate gratitude and reward. And that shows forethought, that they'd rather be hungry now for a bigger reward down the road. Same thing with parrots. Parrots have been known to use a lot of different tools, whether it's to crack open nuts or whether it's to use like salt licks, which is always really interesting. That there's a lot of species of parrots that will actually kind of like bore holes in rocks because they can recognize where like salt drips are coming out of the rock. So although it takes them longer to bore into the rock, their salty reward is worth it. And as a salty fan, I absolutely get that. And then like ravens are absolutely brilliant. I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen that YouTube video of like the one that snowboards down the roof. Have you seen that?
I don't think so, but it sounds right up my alley. So you should send it
Oh
to me.
man. Uh, it's really cool. It's an example of basically this raven is taking like I don't know, a piece of bark or something, and there's like a snowy roof somewhere, and it's seen like sliding down the roof and then taking the little piece of bark and taking it back to the top of the roof and doing it again, which shows pleasure. Like there's no reason otherwise other than, hey, that's really fun. This is something fun to do. And play is really important for animals. It's really important for mammals in particular. So most humans assume that play is only a mammalian characteristic, that it's good for social bonding, it's good for physical development, it's good for just organizational dynamics of within a society, within a community. The same thing with otters or lions. It's a little more unique to see it in birds, but I mean, ravens and crows are some of the smartest animals out there. That like they're one of the only birds that has actually been scientifically documented as like mourning lost kin, which is really interesting. That there is just observation of dead kin animals within their same. I was going to say flock, but a group of crows is actually a murder. So within
It's a
their same
murder.
little murder. So it's really cool. It's really cool to see that birds use tools. However, anyway, looping back to this cuttlefish. Sorry, there's so much cool stuff to talk about. Hopefully that's enough background. Basically, it's really unique because this cuttlefish is the first animal that has ever passed the marshmallow test that doesn't use tools, which is very bizarre. So scientifically speaking, marine biologists don't get the benefit of why they would delay the gratification, which is really exciting because all these other animals, I mean, yes, an octopus is brilliant and a cuttlefish is still very smart. Debatable if they're octopus level, but still very clearly brilliant. But it's just really unique that this is the first animal that we've seen pass this test where we don't get what the need is for them to not immediately eat. The way that this test was conducted, obviously they didn't use marshmallows, they used shrimp, and how a cuttlefish is much more inclined to go after a living shrimp than a dead shrimp. So there was the option of putting a like store-bought seafood prawn, just already cleaned, like a shrimp cocktail prawn, just immediately accessible in a box, and then the cuttlefish could go in and eat it, and it just isn't as delicious versus a live shrimp. Now, the glass containers are see-through, so the cuttlefish can see which are the two options, and they're able to recognize that, hey, this door is open, but after a certain period of time, this other door that has my more desirable treat will also open. So they waited to have the live shrimp after, I think it was like, 100 seconds or so.
This
But
is the if I can cut in on you here, because this was another piece that really fascinated me, was that it's specifically the way that they knew that the other door would open, at least the way my dad read it to me, was that there were symbols on the doors. So there are some sort of symbol that they know correlates with time. And now we're really getting into my territory here, because what we're talking about is a symbol that represents a concept like time. Now we're into really advanced levels of understanding. That part really scared me, because I don't. How is that any different than a human being writing weight on a piece of paper and putting that in front of another human being? I mean, that's the core of language, and then also the core of our understandings of time. So that blows my mind, and I'm super curious about like the symbols that they actually use and how they sort of train them to understand what those symbols mean.
Yeah. So ironically, that was the part that I found least impressive, just because target training is such a commonplace as far as biology and zoology goes in general. It's through a process normally it's through positive reinforcement, which scientifically speaking is if an animal chooses to participate in X, Y, and Z scientific behavior, then they are positively rewarded with their favorite treats. So here at Mote Marine Lab, that's how we train so many different animals, like the really advanced animals like otters and manatees, all the way to like sharks. And we even have like our eels target trained. So it's not so much that I mean, I guess, yes, they are thinking. It is mental stimulation. And the three parts of animal health care or animal husbandry are veterinary care, physical wellness, and mental wellness. So they got to get exercise. They just can't like sit at the bottom of a habitat. They can't, if they get sick, they obviously have to go to the doctor. But then just mental stimulation is really important as well. Animals get bored. So we give them toys to play with. Or, I mean, for some of the less cognitively aware animals, just like moving rocks or seaweed in their habitat is often enough to be like, hey, this looks different than how it used to be. And I'm going to go investigate, even though it's like the same stuff. So that's what like we would do with like our seahorses or some of our pipefish, where it's like,
I love how you just described that, because you take better care of your eels than a lot of people take of themselves, because it is possible for someone to choose to have absolutely no physical stimulation, to have absolutely no wellness, never see a doctor, never worry about their health, and then also, but the only thing that we all do is constant mental stimulation. That's the one thing that you do, like, that humans really hold on to, but I just think that is hilarious. So congrats on taking care of eels better than most people do for their own selves.
I mean, yeah, that's that's really funny. Ironically, I mean, we can go into a whole nother eel tangent because, like, boy, they are brilliant as far as fish go. But the funny part is that different animals have different just memories, basically. That an otter are the otters that we study here at Mote Marine Lab. There are just North American river otters. I mean, they're cute. They're like maybe 17 pounds, just like the normal, just wet weasel looking thing. and they have tons of behaviors. And the main, just primary focus for scientists to look at these animals as far as just care goes is in case these animals have to go to the veterinarian, we practice veterinary behaviors even when they're not at the doctor, because just like people, going to the doctor is really scary. So we want to just kind of practice all the poking and prodding and having to get on a scale or getting in a harness. And even if they don't actually need to, so worst case scenario, if they have to get a shot or a blood draw, it's not anything new. They don't get stressed out and they know they're going to get their favorite treat. So for
Okay,
example, sea turtles.
I have to
Oh,
say
so, yes,
that
please,
back
please, please,
out
please.
loud because Andrea's in the room and she asked me to ask you about otters. And I think it's fascinating that they have to practice veterinary care for otters like they have to practice going to the vet regularly so that when they actually have to do it, they're not scared. I think that's very important and she appreciates that information. Please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. No, no, it's really funny that some of our otters are better patients than people I've seen go to the doctor. So we just want to
Yeah.
preemptively prepare them. Yeah, exactly. And then as far as the just the positive reinforcement and target training. So target training animals is just very like point blank. So our sea turtles, for example, they have different shapes and colors and patterns depending on what is going to happen to them. They have a triangle if they have to go to the veterinarian. They have a square if they have to get up on a scale. So granted, they don't have like a slew of behaviors, but they have like a handful. So like, here's a square. I know that I need to get ready to kind of lurch myself out, and I know I'm going to get weighed. So target training isn't really a new behavior because an animal will gradually realize every single time they get fed, if there is a target that is dropped down in front of them or behind them, they assume to associate that sound. Some of our animals are auditory trained or they're just visual. So even the least smart of the animals, which isn't fair, gradually recognize this stuff. So granted, it takes different amounts of time. For example, we just got a brand new baby snapping turtle at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, at the Mote Marine Laboratory. And like it's learning, and it's not to the point where it recognizes what that target means, but it's every time it touches its target, it gets food. So gradually it's going to be like, wait a minute, if I touch this target, I'm getting my snacks. So like it's learned behaviors. What I was thinking about, the Monterey Bay Aquarium does that with tons of their animals. They have a giant Pacific octopus, which is, it's the largest species of octopus. It is a beefy animal, and they have tons of different targets in order to just work with that individual animal. So the targets themselves, as far as open door is a circle, closed door is a square, door that opens in a delayed amount of time is a triangle, that isn't that hard, because especially considering that the boxes were glass, so they can like see through the target, they can see into the next tank or whatever this experiment was going on through, and recognize like, oh, triangles are the ones that I want to keep my eye out for. So even if they move the shrimp into different boxes, the cephalopod will remember that I want to keep my eye open for that triangle, that's the target that I'm consistently looking for.
Okay, fair enough. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I'll try to have my mind a little less blown by that particular fact. But I do feel like,
Sure.
and again, knowing, I like when we talked, and when I listened to the last episode, I was like, you and I think have good chemistry in terms of how we think about things, because you're gonna say all the information, and my brain jumps into concepts. So I think the real thing when you talk about animal intelligence in any way that sort of blows my mind is that we consider ourselves as the most intelligent thing that exists on this planet, but we have also defined what intelligence is. And I think that there's a real disconnect when you both get to declare the rules of the contest and then call yourself the winner. Because when I think about like ancient hunter-gatherers, when we had a completely different lifestyle as humans, you could see those guys being the winners because they were constantly in a state that reflects how we're supposed to be as humans, and likely far happier generally than we are these days, even though we've surrounded ourselves by all of our intelligence and built the internet and made vaccines and all these great things we can do. But the transition I'm going for here is that ultimately I really get curious about animals like dolphins. I really get curious about animals who live in the sea and have their freedom in a way that we've sort of taken away from ourselves as humans, because they're still in that hunter gatherer world, and they're just doing their thing. And I think we talked a little bit about dolphins being more intelligent than humans last time, but again, in preparing for this episode, I looked up some interesting things. I was watching the show Community last night. I'm showing it to Andrea. She had never seen it before. And there's this episode. It's like we're in season 6. There's a super smart character. The idea behind this character, she's super put together, and nothing phases her. And she gets a call in the middle of the night, and she's like ready to go. And the reason for that is because she's like no, I rest both halves of my brains at different times, so I'm good to go. And I learned, ironically enough, today that that's exactly how dolphins sleep, is by resting their brains. And so the idea that we would consider that like an intelligent superpower, like, oh, I can't imagine if we could do that, and they've already been doing it, lends even more to my theory that they are far smarter than we are, but we still get to crown ourselves king of that one. Please tell me more about dolphins. I'm fascinated.
Oh, well, that is like such a great transition because that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about today is that one of the, if you think the brain thing is going to blow your mind, oh my gosh, get ready for this. So one of the scientists that I actually just interviewed for my education programs 2 weeks ago, hot off the presses, is this incredible scientist. I would love for you to be able to get her on your program. I'll send you all of her info and everything. Her name is Dr. Katie Mchugh. And she has a great social media presence. So once again, follow her, Katie, and then Mchugh. She is a marine mammologist, so a zoologist that works with marine mammals. She is based out of the Chicago Zoological Society. So she has offices in Florida, but her like big research base is up in Chicago. And she is okay. This is gonna blow your mind because like okay. She is the scientist that discovered that dolphins have their own names.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Like,
Well,
what?
how hang on, hang on, hang on,
Oh,
hang on.
yes.
Hang on.
Yes.
How many names do we know how many names there are? I mean, because let's think about humans. There's finite names for people generally, especially like if you go back hundreds of years and you've got like, okay, there's like 6 names. They're all biblical. So, what names? What kind of names are we talking about?
Great. Okay. So, for clarification, names is anthropomorphic. I'm anthropomorphizing that their names. So, Dr. Katie Mchugh, calls them each dolphin for the first time ever, as scientifically documented, to have their signature whistle, which means that there is a sound frequency that is specialized for each individual dolphin. So one dolphin can make or mimic that signature whistle to get the attention of the dolphin that signature whistle pertains to.
All right. Okay.
So
Okay.
I know, right? So the way that dolphins communicate, because obviously they're super social. They're just and then fun fact that she has also corrected me on is that we do not want to say a dolphin pod. So previously, like I feel like what's a group of dolphins called? It's a pod of dolphins. Well, pod has the connotation that they're not fluid, that it is like you are locked into this group of dolphins, which apparently isn't true at all. That most large groups of dolphins are all female with like kind of transient males. But then if it's a baby male, it's still going to stay with the group after a while, then gradually leave and then come into a different group and then disappear. And then females will trade females to different groups based on social dynamics, blah, blah, blah. So we don't really want to say pod apparently anymore, just groups of dolphins. But long story short, she discovered that these dolphins have obviously lots of different ways to communicate, that they have echolocation, which is like really high frequency, like clicks in order to essentially act as underwater sonar to catch animals, because sound travels in the water a lot faster and a lot easier than vision does. So they essentially sonar out and then it bounces around and then comes back and they actually feel it up in their lower jaw. So then they like feel the vibrations up in their lower jaw, connects back to their ears, and that's how they find their food. So they have echolocation, they have like their normal whistles and chirps and squeaks and all these other things. However, the signature, and which they all share, that there's like echolocation shared frequencies and like just general communications of like, all right, we're going to use this hunting style. Let's all chirp together to get on the same page. However, the signature whistle is where it gets really weird because that's essentially a dolphin communicating to say who they are. Now, it's a little backwards as far as human introductions go, where it's like, I'm trying to say who you are, right? I'm trying to get your attention. Or so I would call your name. Dolphins kind of do it in the other way around, that they go into a group just kind of clicking their own name. So then everyone gets to like know who they are. So in case another dolphin needs them, they can click that, they can mimic that signature whistle to get their attention.
That's not so distant from humans. I mean, I can think of several people that when they start drinking, they pretty much walk into a room and go, "Hey, it's me. I'm Tyler. It's me." So
Right.
I can understand. That's pretty close to how we do it.
Right, exactly. So it's more of just like it'd be like you go into a group and it says Tyler, 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 Tyler. That is just like, it's just like that same series. And then you're like, ah, it's Tyler. Got it. So then if I need your attention, then I would make your frequency. But it's the weirdest behavior because we don't know who assigns it. Is it a mother to daughter dynamic? How readily do they communicate? And then if they have these signature whistles for individual signature dolphins, does that mean that they have words for other things? Theoretically, they could. So who knows?
Right. That's not too far fetched. As soon as you identify like a subject and an
Right.
object, and then you associate that with language in some way. And I mean, the other thing is, that's I think the question I was trying to pose is that, given that there's more water on Earth than there is land, it's really hard for us to say who is more advanced in this race of evolution. And the idea that we have a good shot of knocking ourselves out far before they would knock themselves out. They give them a few billion years and maybe they communicate like us, or maybe we're not the pinnacle and they're already doing it better than we are and we have things to learn from the way they do it. In fact, I think about this kind of stuff a lot, like even the certain senses that we have as humans. Like we've got the five senses, but then we recognize that there are animals, like even in the simplest form, that dogs can hear things at different frequencies than we can, and that other animals can see different spectrums of light than we can. It's that's almost like saying there's another sense, and there certainly could be. So we may be missing the way they communicate because we haven't evolved enough to even identify it in any way.
Yeah, see, I mean, granted, yes, I would say that they are very ideal for their individual habitat. And the fact that their social dynamics are so advanced that they have decided to need names because they're so cooperative, I would say is extremely advanced. Also, the fact that they don't really leave each other. Like they're not really solitary animals. So it's not kind of a one and done behavior where, yes, that worked for this one situation, but it's going to die out because we're not going to need it. Well, no, they work with each other their entire lives. Like Dr. Katie Mchugh was saying that she has been tracing lineages of dolphins, that great grandmother passed down the trait of this dolphin to this dolphin, and that she has cataloged that dolphins inherit their favorite foods from mom. Like, yes, they'll eat lots of fish, but if mom's favorite fish was a pinfish, but grandma's favorite, then she learned that grandma's favorite fish was a pinfish. But that could be one family tree versus another family tree where, oh, I really like snook, or I really like drum, or whatever these other fish are. So, yes, they'll eat all the fish, but they have their favorites based on like home cooking, essentially. So, yes, it's really wild to think that dolphin dynamics are that advanced. I mean, the name thing just like blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got preferences, but almost what you're describing when you describe that family tree is also like it's almost culture. I mean, it's almost like passing down a culture in a way of like being inclined to certain foods. I think we associate that as humans with our own cultures and certain things that we're drawn to or not drawn to. Like we talked last time on the episode, I'm a kid from the Midwest that comes from a couple generations, mostly of kids from the Midwest, and so I don't. Not only was I not brought up on things like seafood, but then probably not neither were my parents, and neither
Mm.
were their parents. And I think I'm trying to be accurate here because I know my family sometimes listens to this, but I think that's fairly accurate. So there's almost there is a culture there that gets passed down too, even besides just taste. But I think I like how you mentioned that they aren't solitary, and it's cool that we associate sort of the ability to cooperate in a group with sort of that an evolutionary dynamic. But the other thing is, solitary is also kind of a relative term in the ocean, right? Like, because when you think about before humans started making a ton of sound in the ocean, and this I pulled this fact, you'll like this. Apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, apparently the speed of sound in water is nearly 5 times faster than the speed of sound in air. And I had always heard that whales back, thousands of years ago, are basically able to talk across the oceans to each other. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that solitary, even if you're miles and miles and miles away,
Right.
especially given how quickly the sound travels, and then that the fact that they can do it, that they can make a noise that loud. So it's all relative in the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really crazy to think that the ocean's actually a much noisier place than one would have assumed, that fish do talk to each other. It's just normally at such a low frequency that our ears can't pick it up. So if you ever heard of like a drum fish, like a red drum or a white drum or all these different types of drums, why are they called drumfish? Well, because their noise sounds like a drum. Like it is a booming noise, but it's on such a low frequency that we don't really hear it, but when you feel it. But theoretically, other animals can. Like, for example, sharks. A lot of people think that like sharks, they can smell blood from miles away, which is a little dramatic. Yes, they have a very good sense of smell and they have a very good sense of taste. However, they have a really good sense of hearing, and they actually can find a lot of their food just by listening for it, because fish are loud, which is actually a really important point. I'm going to send you all of Katie's information. But one of the really neat things that Katie mentions is one of the biggest problems in the ocean is noise pollution. So we think of plastic pollution, we think of overfishing, we think of bycatch. I'm like, yes, absolutely. All of those things are really bad. Well, the ocean is really loud, and all those animals need to be able to understand and communicate with each other and be able to hear each other. Where boats are super loud, submarines are super loud, underwater drilling and mining and fracking and explosions, all of that is super loud. Building a dock is really loud, all that hammering. And that is really detrimental to the prey, to see if they are unable to notice predators around them. For animals like dolphins that need to be able to communicate, one of the activities that I'm going to send to Tyler right now is a really fun activity that we made with Dr. Mchugh, which is really funny actually, because like it's definitely geared towards maybe 8th graders, but it's a really fun activity to do anyway, because you get to make your own signature whistle and you can overlay it with like boat pollution and like boat traffic and noise pollution. So then you can actually like build your own signature whistle and then gradually crank up the boat noise. And you're like, wait, this is really hard to hear my own signature whistle. So so I will
I'll put
put all of that. So
I'll put these in the podcast notes if that's okay. So people want to go play with some of the
yeah,
things you're sending me, they can go try these out.
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
please, absolutely.
And then my last thing on dolphins, which we can totally move past dolphins because believe me, I got a lot for you. Was I had I've heard this one before, but the fact that they get high on pufferfish, that they get intoxicated from pufferfish, which of course I'm sitting here, we're doing an evening show today, so I've got my whiskey
Absolutely.
going this evening, and I like to become intoxicated, and that's another thing we associate with like a level of intelligence is like the ability to play or the ability to alter our brain chemistry, and lots of humans do that in lots of different ways, and I've had lots of guests tell me about interesting mushroom trips as well. But
All those
there are
mycologists.
so yeah, so there are ways that we also change our own brain chemistry as recreation or for a spiritual mean or whatever. So how do we know that they're sort of getting like high on, like, how do we judge what that means? Because it's a strange phrase.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I I would say, to not answer your question with the best answer I can possibly provide, is that I feel like that probably maybe stems from your culture, right? That I think this was a mistake that an adult, like one dolphin has to make the mistake to learn what you can and can't eat, right? So, like, oh, yikes, this is either like a pokey, spiny fish, or uh-oh, this is venomous, this is poisonous. I shouldn't be eating any of that stuff. So, based on that, I would say that initially it was a oops, and now here's the damage from it. But then the fact that there was recovery was probably an observed behavior that, oh, this impaired mom, but mom eventually got better, theoretically. So it's hard to say if they're actively seeking that out. I know that there's been studies of them using pufferfish as like beach balls, and that they have, because pufferfish get scared, they slurp in water, they like triple their size, and they're all balloony, right? So there has been like documentation of dolphins like beach balling them around and that is just like game. That is just they are having fun. Because an orca will do that with sea lions, that they will just like throw things around. One of the weird things about orcas is that they're like which fun fact is the largest member of the dolphin family. So it's still on brand. So an orca is a type of dolphin. That orcas are like one of the only animals outside of humans that kills to kill, which is really interesting, that they don't necessarily need to kill to eat. And a lot of that, once again, they're probably not doing it like, I mean, obviously it's not malicious, but it's like, this is really fun. I want to play hard. And then, I played too hard and now it's dead. And I think,
it's like an of mice of men scenario. They're just playing a little too hard. This is another of Andrea's questions, which was she loves watching Planet Earth apparently, but she gets tripped up at the point where the orcas are just playing with their not food, playing with their toys, I guess. And she was curious how you explain that to children, because it's a little dark for the younger crowd.
I mean, I would say you can make the same comparison that you do with zoo and aquarium animals, that these animals need to get mentally stimulated. In a zoo and an aquarium or a marine laboratory, it's a lot easier because we can just give them toys to play with. Well, there's not toys out. I mean, I guess anything can be a toy out in the ocean if you're a giant orca, So if you are this huge animal, absolutely. A smaller sea lion, it runs away, and then you can like swim after it, but then you can block it, and then it has to move. And I mean, eventually, like, it's going to die from exhaustion, or it's going to like drown, or you're going to be a little too not gentle enough with your teeth when you're nipping at it. So I would say that that's part of the physical and mental stimulation. Most of the documented cases of that behavior have been with younger orcas, where, they don't. It's very, you're right. That's very mice and men. They loved their toy to death.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. Yeah, that's a strange one for sure. I by the way, I so appreciate this episode, just to take a intermission here, because you've saved my audience from having to listen to me talk about jiu-jitsu again, or talk about sourdough again. But I was thinking of you because I've got actually even recently another friend who I've talked into the sourdough game, and now I've got like a whole family of people who I've talked into making sourdough and sent them guides on how to do it and all these things and helped them get started. But on our last episode, you mentioned that you love Cheez-Its, I think, but that they have palm oil, and so you generally avoid them. But I have created a sourdough Cheez-It recipe. Because it's sourdough, it's like 100% guilt-free. It's just all protein and pre-digested gluten, and they're pretty close to the real deal. No palm oil, so that one's for you.
Man, see, the only bad part about living in Florida is that it's beach body season all year round. So like, you're undoing all the work I'm trying to do. So cool. Thanks for that.
But it's sourdough.
I appreciate that.
I'm not. I keep the beach body 100%, and I eat sourdough almost every day. And this is how I've talked to people into this, because I've shown them like, no, you can be fit and also eat as much bread product as you want as long as it's sourdough. So you almost, I should say, saved my audience from another sourdough episode, but you didn't quite, because I was able to sneak it in. I don't remember where we were going with this, but I know that another recent news thing. So we were recently in Albuquerque. We were actually supposed to be in Fort Worth, Texas, at the time of the big winter storm that hit, and we luckily avoided most of it by being out in New Mexico. But it did hit us for a couple days. It was rough, but luckily we kind of came to Texas right after it had all kind of passed through, and they were still like recovering. It's definitely rough, but the big news from Texas regarding turtles, of course, is that apparently they had rescued like 300 or so, maybe I've got my numbers wrong. I think it was like 300 turtles that they kept inside and kept warm during this winter storm. And then I saw videos of them releasing them back into the water, and they had them pushed them down little kiddie slides, which was sort of adorable, back into the water. And I wondered if you knew a little more kind of behind the scenes about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. See, turtle rescues are like such a challenging topic to talk about because part of me is just like, oh my gosh, look at this adorable sea turtle. I am so happy that I can like interact with it. Right now, currently at Mote Marine Lab, we have a sea turtle hospital. We are the only facility in North America that has a whale hospital. So we are theoretically prepared to veterinary care for a whale, but 90% of the time it's sea turtles. We get the occasional dolphin, and then I don't think we've had a whale for a few years, but we get every once in a while X, Y, and Z incident will arise. But we do have a lot of sea turtles right now. Now, it's really challenging because I can just walk down the street from my office and see 30 plus adorable little sea turtles in their little hospital pools, and it's just the cutest thing in the world. However, the double edged sword with that is like, oh, you guys aren't doing so well. So it's almost like I don't want to see sea turtles in my daily life because if I do, something's wrong with them. Ugh. So it's I don't know. It's one of those, like we also have a sea turtle hatchling hospital, and oh my god, a baby sea turtle is like the size of an Oreo. It is just the most pure, wholesome thing in the world.
And I think you
Yeah,
mentioned last time that they get physical therapy on like their shoulders, maybe they're like the rotator cuffs or whatever it is, which is pretty excellent to hear about.
oh,
I really want to, next time we're down there. Like last time we didn't. It was the days turned out all wrong, and we didn't get to come and actually like tour around with you a little bit. But next time that is 100% happening. I'm getting my behind the scenes tour for sure.
absolutely. Yeah, we're coming into sea turtle nesting season. It's May through October. And assuming you're here for long enough, we're always looking for volunteers. So if any of you listeners are tuning in anywhere around the Gulf of Mexico, all the way up to pretty much Cape Cod, you can look into the local fish and wildlife groups, and it's called the Sea Turtle Patrol. And it's a group of volunteers that essentially has to go through a certification process to go out either super early in the morning or really late at night to look for sea turtles. So sea turtles are incredible reptiles, and they're not brilliant, but they've been around for over 65 million years. So I mean, they've been swimming around outlasted the dinosaurs, so that they're clearly doing something right. Ironically, their brain is about the size of your thumb, so there's not a lot of brain up in that head, but they're still like pretty incredible animals. Now, currently at Mote, we have, gosh, I think we're down to like maybe our last 20 or so, but we rescued a lot of sea turtles that are known as cold stunned sea turtles. So, sea turtles are reptiles, which means that they are ectothermic, which is just a really fancy science way to say that they are unable to regulate their own body temperature. So, they are cold blooded animals. Humans, mammals, we're warm blooded. So, like if you touch yourself, like you're creating heat. So no matter how cold it is outside, your body will gradually get colder, but you can create your own body heat. That's why you see like lizards and snakes like basking in the sun, because the warmer they get, the more energy they have. So sea turtles do have fat, they do have blubber, they are well insulated, however, moderately. So as far as marine reptiles go, there are only four, four and a half. There are four and a half types of marine reptiles. So there's the sea turtle, the family of sea turtles. There are 7 sea turtles. We'll get back to that. 7.5 types of sea turtles that live around the world. There's the marine iguana, which lives off of, let's see. Oh my gosh, the islands. Oh, this is super embarrassing. Where did Darwin go? The
Yeah. Yep.
oh my
But now you're
God,
confused, and now I've lost it too. Galapagos.
Galapagos. Oh my God, that yikes, yikes. Do better. So yes, right off the Galapagos. Then there's like saltwater crocodiles, which live off Australia. And then there's like sea snakes and then sea kraits, which are just also like a sea snake, but with like a paddle tail instead. So that's like so those are like the 4.5, because like a sea krait is like a sea snake. It just doesn't go up to land in order to lay eggs. It has live birth in the water, but it's a snake. So those are like the four main groups of marine reptiles. However, they're all cold-blooded. Now, what makes a sea turtle so special is that unlike all of these other reptiles, they rarely interact with the shore. A male sea turtle will never come back to land after it hatches. A female sea turtle will only come back to lay eggs. Now, they're very temperature sensitive. So during the summer, when it's warm in larger areas, then a sea turtle theoretically goes all the way up to Canada. But they just have to make it back down to Florida or the Gulf of Mexico by winter, where it's more warm just all year round, right? So they don't have as wide of a habitat range, with the exception of the leatherback sea turtle. So the leatherback sea turtle is in its weird kind of own family of sea turtles. It doesn't have like a bony shell. It has like a weird, like tiry wetsuit shell. It's very rubbery. Leatherback, duh. And they just have lots of extra blubber. So it's actually like a cold water sea turtle, lives around like England and Scotland, can do the whole Arctic Circle thing and not matter just because it's gigantic. It's the largest living member of the sea turtle family. They get to 13 plus feet long. They weigh 1,500 pounds. They're just, oh, no, they're 1,300 pounds and they get to about 8 feet long. I mean, they're huge. They're very, very large animals. So they just have more body. They have more blubber. So they can live in colder waters. However, the cold-stunned sea turtles, basically like the biggest issue is like Cape Cod. So if anyone's listening from Massachusetts, Cape Cod obviously looks like a little hook. So sea turtles normally hug the coast in order to just drop right back down to Florida or Texas or Gulf of Mexico. Well, that little hook of Cape Cod traps them there, and then the water gets too cold. They don't realize they have to go up and around in order to make it over. So that's like the #1 sea turtle cold stunned stranding location in the United States, because they're all hanging out in the delicious foods of New England, and then it gets too cold too fast. So what we do is we partner with a lot of rescue groups up in Cape Cod, whether they're like the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. There's a lot of sea turtle rescue groups up there, local fish and wildlife groups, and they essentially medevac these turtles down to us. And for all the folks that are like, wait, isn't that going to mess them up? Well, no, because they're trying to get to where we are anyway. So their goal is to get to Florida in the first place. So we're just kind of getting a first-class ticket to Florida. Then we take them into our hospital. We rehydrate them. We warm them up. We make sure that they have the proper nutrition and vitamins and minerals. So the fact that cold snap in Texas was particularly terrible is because that's like the safe haven that turtles normally go to in the winter, because yes, it's chilly, but it's not supposed to be as chilly as it was. How's that for a roundabout answer?
No, I like that. That's actually fascinating, but it's a curious thing too, because we talked so much last time about the idea of sort of human intervention with animals and how that changes their own survival and how that changes their evolution, and it's interesting that we are the police of the world in that way. But at the same time, my suspicion would be that weather events like this are likely connected to human activity as well. I don't know much about this storm, but in general, I have been generally led to believe that climate change is the thing that contributes to storms becoming more intense. So in a way, we've caused the problem, and so we have a certain responsibility to also try not to let that affect our underwater friends. Am I right in thinking that?
Absolutely. I mean, boy, get Tracy Fanera started on this, because I mean, she's an environmental engineer by trade, and she has some big opinions on just climate change. I mean, like, they're all right because she's like brilliant, but yes, basically a lot of people think like, oh, it's global warming. No. So you want to like nix that, because global warming is not correct. because yes, some areas are getting hotter, but some areas are getting colder. So when individuals who don't believe in climate change say like global warming, well, look at Texas, it's freezing over. So you're like, well, no, it's climate change where basically weather conditions are getting more extreme because everything's kind of falling out of balance. So one of the big fancy science words we always like to teach to our students is equilibrium, which is basically environmental balance, and everything syncs up. And climate change is kind of just skewing everything. Where that, I mean, for example, gosh, 2020 had more hurricanes than any other year ever, or something. Like it was just insane that we like ran out of names for the hurricanes or something obnoxious. And that's not normal. Like, yes, it's okay to have a few hurricanes because that's just what storms do. And that's how water evaporates from the ocean. And that's how storms are made. And of course, they get blown in, blah, 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 air pressure changes. But the number is not correct. So the fact that we had an extra hot, wet summer, and then we had an extra cold winter in areas that aren't supposed to be getting that cold means everything's falling out of equilibrium. And sea turtles, which are living fossils that they are built to survive, they can't keep up as fast. I mean, heck, humans can't keep up. I mean, we had over 26 hurricanes this last year, ran out of names through the alphabet for them. And like we were swamped like all throughout the Gulf region. So we're not doing so hot either, let alone poor sea turtles that also need help. So yeah, climate change, if you hear anyone say global warming, it's like, yes, some areas are getting hotter, but like, no, you got to say climate change because some areas are getting colder, some areas are getting windier, some areas are getting more hail that has never had hail before. And it's, I mean, it's like extreme, just extreme weather conditions. One of the scariest things, just looping it back to marine life, is so in areas where it's getting warmer sooner, it's triggering earlier springs. It's just springtime in general, which makes everything fall behind. So, for example, one of the big like catastrophes that's taking place like in the Chesapeake Bay area is that it's getting warmer. Like it is springtime right now, and it's not really supposed to be for like another month and a half or so. So one of the big problems is that all of those spring plants are starting to bloom. So a lot of the smaller plant-eating animals, like all the little arthropods, for example, horseshoe crabs, are starting to eat all those delicious things that are starting to bloom, delicious. However, all of the birds that are down in Brazil on their winter migration vacations that have to make it all the way up to Canada or like Alaska that use the Chesapeake Bay region as what's known as a stopover, or basically a break that they fly from like Brazil to like Belize to like the Chesapeake to Canada, Arctic Circle. So they are now going to miss the eggs of the horseshoe crabs because they haven't left yet. But based on how the horseshoe crabs are laying their eggs, right now, they theoretically should be birds that show up. They eat all those delicious, fatty, nutrient-filled eggs, gives them the energy to make it all the way up to the Arctic Circle. So like those birds are not, I mean, there's maybe like a handful, which will obviously like survival of the fittest, but like there should be much higher percentages of these birds that should be re-energized to make it to the Arctic Circle. So yes, climate change is messing everything up.
Yeah, it's an interesting branding problem that it started as the term global warming and has, taken on the term climate change, which I think is, more accurate, and you'll get a little more. I don't know. You get less anecdotal fights when you say something like climate change. So all we're talking about is different now. We're not talking about a certain type of different because we've learned that it's not. That's an interesting challenge, and I definitely, I talked to Dr. Tracy, and we're definitely going to get together. I think we'll probably do that next time I'm in Florida. I think because when I can, I like to have first-time guests on in person because again, you know this. It's such a different experience. Like this is fun and this is great, but that's because we're friends. Doing this with a stranger is like I don't feel like I really met that, but like we didn't really have that connection. So I do what I can. But to change the subject on you again, because I brought notes today, and I don't bring notes ever. But it's just that it's so challenging with you because if I just get you started, you'll go on a topic and it's phenomenal. It's all I want. So this is an interesting thing I learned. this article had this wrong, by the way, because they said male octopi. So male
Oh,
octopuses.
oh,
Um,
shame.
apparently, uh, uh, get ready, folks. It's the evening version of the podcast. Turn the lights down low because apparently, when male octopuses have sex, they experience permanent dementia after mating. So they supposedly permanently are impaired after that. And I want to know if you know anything about that, if that is true, first of all, because that seems like a real disadvantage evolutionarily, at least the way we mate. Like, males in our species are supposed to constantly be having sex. So the idea of that is interesting to me.
I mean, don't talk about constantly having sex during a pandemic because, like, God,
I told you. I
bleak.
told you this is strangers worth meeting after dark right now. So
Like, oh God, it's like I forgot what it's like. So good, great. Doing real well. No jokes. For anyone who
married life,
doesn't know
that's
what
the way to
Sarah,
be. That's how it is.
yeah, great. So happy for you, mate. Great, great. For anyone who doesn't know what Sarasota is or where Sarasota is, we're about an hour south of Tampa, and the median age here is 65. So it's ideal for someone in their 20s. Love it.
Hey, they're all having sex. All the 65-year-olds for sure, all
Oh,
the time are having sex.
yeah. Love that. Such a beautiful image. Lifelong love. I love it. Fantastic. Anyway, an octopus, however, on the flip side, does not really have a lifelong love situation because they don't really live that long in the first place. So one of the weird, I guess, honestly beneficial adaptations of cephalopods in general is that they just burn out fast. They live a really bright, literally because of camouflage, really bright, vibrant, creative, productive life, and then they are just like shot. So, for example, cuttlefish generously will live over 2 years. That they had the common cuttlefish, and common cuttlefish live like 2 years. The ones we study here at Mote Marine Lab are the pharaoh cuttlefish, and like, gosh, they live maybe 3 years. Those really gorgeous, like flamboyant cuttlefish with like the explosion of colors, they live, I think, like a year. I mean, they just don't live a long time. An octopus, the giant Pacific octopus, like the biggest octopus in the world, lives 7 years or something. Like, you are lucky to get it to double digits. And that's just part of how they are because they have a truckload of eggs. I mean, they have hundreds to thousands of eggs. Like, I mean, gosh, I feel like, let's see, I know that the giant Pacific octopus has like over like 40,000 eggs. And cuttlefish lay tons of them throughout their life. I mean, they get sexually mature really fast. So they're pretty much ready to like crank out once they're out of their larval state. So one of the really neat things about an octopus in general is that, yes, it is sad they don't live that long, but as far as like evolutionary adaptations go, it's like not that big of a deal because they're more than making up for it. Plus, males, one of the weird things about, so yes, anyway, one of the easy, believe it or not, it's actually very easy to tell a male octopus from a female octopus, that a male octopus has 7 very muscular arms, and the 8th arm is this weird little noodly dude that's like very, almost like ramen noodle like, and it's like all curled up. It's like they're very self-conscious of their noodly little tentacle arm, excuse me. And that last arm is solely used for depositing sperm packets to the female. So they have to do like a big flamboyant show. They change their colors and they have to put on a nice little camouflage display. Some species of octopus actually present gifts, which is really cool that, hey, I caught you a lobster. Hey, I caught you a crab. Here's a nice meal for you. Let's seal the deal. One of my favorite facts about an octopus is that after the male has deposited his little sperm packet, the female has like a little pouch, kind of little hood that lifts up. It reminds me a lot of like on a sweatshirt, those like kind of front like arm tube pockets, on the front of sweatshirts. It kind of looks like that, where they like you stick your arms into it. So that's kind of what their like egg sac looks like up inside their body. So the male kind of snakes his little noodly tentacle arm in there and drops the sperm packet in. Well, the fun part is the female fertilizes it whenever the heck she wants. So she chooses to fertilize her own eggs. So if there is a hotter, studlier octopus that shows up, she can dump that old sperm packet and take the new sperm packet. How
Whoa.
feminist is that, right? Her body, her choice.
That's absolutely wild. Point of clarification for me. The
Yeah.
eighth dangly arm. Do they use it as an arm? Because I'm confused as to why that's not just considered a penis. I mean, are they able? Do they move with it, or why is it?
Oh,
Why would is it still considered an arm?
that's a great question. So it's not actively producing the semen. It's not producing the gametes. It's holding them. So it's basically like a special little delivery arm. So like a penis creates and expels said gametes, said male genetic material. This basically their little sperm packets almost look like a little hacky sack kind of. And this is just a little sneaky arm that like wraps it up and then kind of snakes it out. I just had to Google how many eggs does an octopus have. An average octopus lays 200,000 eggs. So a giant Pacific octopus lays 20,000 to 40,000 eggs. So
Wow.
they just have tons and tons of eggs. So they don't need to live long lives. Now, the male often loses that noodly arm during that process of mating because sometimes it drops off, sometimes the female eats it, sometimes he's very prepared to lose it. It doesn't really serve any other purpose than just presenting sperm. But then in that same vein, an octopus is really interesting because once again, it's an invertebrate, it's a mollusk, it's snail adjacent. So the weird part is they actually display really good parental behavior. Like an octopus mom is a real good mom. So an octopus mom normally creates a den, so a cave or a hole in a coral reef, and like claims it as her territory. Then she lays her 200,000 eggs and glues them to normally the ceiling of the cave in these like long, pearly, almost like bubble wrap strands. They're very gorgeous and they're big. And they're like, I'm just thinking like a giant Pacific octopus. It's like, they're like kind of thumb size and they're large eggs. And then the female guards them until she dies. Boom, point blank. She never leaves them alone. That if a predator is swimming up, she will like throw off one of her arms. It'll like swim away. The arm will swim away, and the predator will like chase after the arm in order for the mom to guard the baby. She's constantly like fanning them with water to make sure the water doesn't get stagnant, so they have constant sources of oxygen. She is a really good mom. One of the other really wild things is, they die. They pretty much die after the babies hatch because they've exhausted themselves. But they also they eat their own tentacles, which is really interesting because they don't leave their den in order to go hunting. So thank God they have 8 tentacles because they gradually eat their own tentacles until their babies hatch. They also go through this really like gross process called like sloughing, where like their skin just starts to deteriorate. They literally fall apart until their babies hatch because they're that dedicated moms.
That's super weird. Why do they need to like eat their own body? Like humans have a built-in way to eat our own bodies, just we do it from the inside. Why do they actually have to physically eat their own body?
I guess that's a really weird thing to think about, that they don't expect to live. This is like their one and done batch. That's why they have the mechanism to make sure they pick the best mate, because after they fertilize those eggs, that's their countdown timer, right? So that's why they can like choose to activate that sperm packet whenever they see fit, because once they've committed, like that's it for them. The
That's
other
super
really crazy thing about
interesting.
an octopus is that, yeah, right. They're really good parents. The dad's not really in the picture, but like a female will guard the eggs. The fact that she just doesn't leave them in any capacity. And that's kind of the same story with like a lot of members of the cephalopod family. Not quite as extreme as the octopus, but like a cuttlefish doesn't have like a den per se, but like they'll kind of just glue all their eggs into like just in the general vicinity, and then the it depends on the species, but sometimes the male will guard them, sometimes the female will guard them, sometimes they'll guard them together. But basically, after they finish laying their eggs, they're very prepared for that to be it. They don't have multiple generations. Now, the reason that this is so important that all the eggs hatch, so it's kind of like I mean, weirdly, I guess you could say it's kind of like almost like a human behavior, that there's a lot of parental investment in order to guarantee success. So elephants, humans, whales, dolphins, manatees, they don't have that many babies, but the babies stay with the mom. So there's lots of energy and attention exerted by mom to guarantee one or two babies will make it to adulthood, versus a rabbit where their strategy is like, I'm just going to crank out all these babies, fingers crossed, one of them will make it to adulthood. So not a lot of investment, basically. So an octopus is kind of like a weird situation where there is parental investment, but there's also a lot of babies, but there aren't multiple generations of babies. So it's like a weird kind of like hybrid of the mom really does care and the mom really wants to guarantee as many babies as possible make it, but then one and done kind of situation.
How you've got me curious. Okay, so I think you said it was 20,000 eggs that they lay. Although correct me if I'm
200,000
number. 200,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So 200,000. So even more insane. My number was insane, and then that number is even more insane. So 200,000. It'd be interesting to see how, I feel like, how gender works out with those babies, because as humans, I think generally we assume that like a normal healthy birth. I don't actually know what the statistic is, the odds that you will have a boy or a girl. I don't know what those odds are, but we generally assume they're somewhere around 50-50. But when you've got 200,000, there would be a legitimate trend that you could see of how the genders break down there. And then the other interesting thing would be if certain like family lines are more, have a higher percentage of one gender or the other, because because I assume that they're not, all these babies would not be the same gender. It's not like having one gender of baby. I assume there's some sort of mix, but I wonder how that number kind of balances itself out in nature then.
Right.
Especially, and but the other thing
yeah,
is,
yeah.
the last part of that was that especially because the male will, I guess, only mate once then. So, you could, in theory, your species could go on just fine if you had very few males and a lot of females, if the males can mate more than once. But if they can only mate once, then you need to have some type of even split.
Yeah, no, that's great. Those are all really valid points. I mean, the rapid reproductive rate, I would say, and those characteristics are under the assumption that not all 200,000 babies are going to make it to adulthood. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read Monarchs of the Sea. I think I plugged that last time.
You did, and I have
It's this
not. I'm
awesome
sorry,
book
but
all
I
about
will.
like, oh, no, it's so good. One of my favorite quotes from that is that squids are made to be delicious. Like, we love calamari, but I mean, I just think that's really funny that it is a squid's job to be food in the ocean. I just think that's really hilarious. That everything loves that, mammals, other fishes, other squid, and octopus will eat a squid. I mean, squids are just made to be eaten. So they want to guard their eggs to make sure they hatch on the assumption that, I mean, gosh, sea turtles, for example, like I just know this statistic, so I don't know about octopus in particular, but like a sea turtle has 100 eggs every nest. There are 10 nests per nesting season by one female. So so how many eggs is that? Do some quick
Don't ask me
whiskey
to do
math.
fast math, uh, because the numbers flew in and out so fast. It's the whiskey. It really is. Tell me one more time. Let me do it. Here. I'm
All
gonna
right.
let the computer
So
do it for me. What you got?
if one female sea turtle lays 100 eggs in one nest, but lays 10 nests per season, how many eggs does one female sea turtle lay all year?
In one. What do you mean when you say per season?
Or like in one nesting season? So like so in each nesting season between May to October, there's 10 nests. Each nest has 100 eggs.
Okay, I thought that there
a
was
hundred
another
times 10.
variable in this, so now I sound really stupid. But I thought you
No,
were. I thought I had to do something with the
no,
seasons
no,
too.
no,
So
no,
no, quite obviously, what we're talking about
no.
is 1,000. Uh,
The 1000, beautiful, fantastic. Exactly. No, that's so fine. So
I
basically,
promise I
there's
can pass like
one
elementary
eight.
school math. It was just, it was just that I thought there was something I had to do in terms of the seasons. So I apologize.
No, no, zero worries at all. So it's basically one of those situations where one baby sea turtle hatchling out of 1,000 makes it to adulthood. So that's because they're small and delicious and they have lots of problems whether they make it out to the ocean in the first place. So let alone a squid that has like, or an octopus that has 200,000 babies each time, and they're even more delicious and they're adorable little larvae. So they have all of these predators to make it through. So like that is super challenging. So I mean, I would say that that entire dynamic of looking at the sex of like male versus female would be inherently challenging based on the mom's doing everything she can to make sure those 200,000 babies make it out to hatch. But I have no idea what percentage make it to reproductive age. That's why they reach sexual maturity so fast. Because like a cuttlefish has to be reproducing within the first year, has to, because they don't live two.
Right. How do okay, so this raises another question for me. It's perfect for these strangers worth meeting after dark.
Yeah.
Because you know, even as humans have become a larger and larger animal on this earth, we have learned better and better ways to essentially avoid mixing too similar of gene pools, and by that I generally mean incest. So within when you've got these animals that live in the same close area and there are potentially so many different offspring and who knows who's what, is there some sort of mechanism built in to help them to continue to shuffle the gene pool so that they can do all of the things that shuffling the gene pool does for an animal?
Yeah, see, that is a really great question. Sea turtles are actually a really good example of this. So one of the really interesting things about sea turtles is that the sex of the sea turtle is determined by the temperature of the sand the eggs are laid in, which is really interesting. Also, just looping back, just because like you're my friend and like we're teach each other all these things. You said gender. We don't want to say gender. We want to say sex, because like gender is like a human construct. So it's not like the gender of the sea turtle. It's like the sex of the sea turtle. So like the
Okay.
sex. Yeah, I mean, just like gender is like based on personal identification. So that's much more of like a human thing. As far as like sexual characteristics, so there's like male gametes and female gametes. So that's like just the sex of the animals have sex. Until we learn that an orca has different gender identity pronouns. So who knows? So an orca and an orkin, who knows? But as far as the sea turtle sexual characteristics goes, the neat thing about a sea turtle is that because the temperature of the sand determines the sex of the sea turtle, climate change is really screwing this up because a sea turtle mom has it programmed in her head that she knows how deep to dig the nest in order to make sure it's a nice 50-50 split. If the sand is cool, it becomes males. If the sand is hot, it becomes females. So all the eggs at the bottom of the nest that are way far away from the sun, because I mean, a sea turtle nest gets deep. I mean, it is like arm's depth deep. And all the ones at the bottom that are away become males, and all the ones at the surface close to the sun become females. Well, the problem with climate change is that it's getting hotter deeper down. So now there's all these female sea turtles out there and no male sea turtles. So dating for a sea turtle is getting really hard because there's not a lot of males to go around. So as far as inbreeding goes, yes, that definitely has the capacity. I don't know about inbreeding in sea turtles per se, just because our populations just aren't doing so well. I know there's been some really crazy studies about like inbreeding within shark communities. That there's been like weird like cyclops sharks and stuff that have been caught by fishermen in areas where there isn't just a lot of genetic diversity. So that's like a bottlenecking effect where these sharks need very particular habitats, and said habitat is collapsing. So the populations are collapsing. So only certain members of these sea turtle or of these shark groups are able to successfully survive, odds are it might be your cousin. So I know that that's a really big problem with like some species of sharks. Um,
So this is another way that humans are impacting
yeah,
the future of these animals, where we didn't even realize because we're changing the sex then of the actual breakdown, and then we're also, you know, causing them to limit their group and limit those genetic pools, which I think anybody would argue is something that contributes to the evolution of a certain species, is the ability to mix that genetic code. So
yeah,
we really impact more than we think. I mean, we're we're messing with a lot here that we don't know about. This is my favorite, one of my favorite sci-fi writers, of course, Michael Crichton,
yeah,
and his whole thing in all of his books is basically like we're playing with something we don't understand,
mm,
uh, and it's always, that's why I like reading his books, because it reminds me not to mess with what's not in my lane.
yeah,
But this is another one of those ways that we're doing that we are affecting it, where these, you know, where this animal would be in 2021 is different because humans exist, and that's a strange fact. But it's not uncommon, because in the same way, you know, you have to assume the dinosaurs impacted certain animals and where they are in 2021 in similar ways. But we've done it in I think ways that we don't expect and that we don't even understand as we're doing it.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the other really scary parts that we like super don't know what we're doing is like pheromone disruptors. So just by having all of, or and just hormone disruptors in general. So by like soaps and like all of these other things and like deodorants and God, all of this stuff that we don't really think twice about, sunscreens. Well, all of the crap in sunscreen like washes off of us when we go in the ocean. And like, yes, it's not making a dolphin sick, but it's causing like species of corals, for example, to have both male and female sexual characteristics and just have these weird genetic mutations that prevent them from being reproductively viable whatsoever. So all of these poor animals at the very bottom of the food chain that just are closer to just the like substance level are not doing so well. But then there's all this other really fun stuff to like bioaccumulation, biomagnification, where things at the top of the food chain eat all of these other things that have just compiled all that crap and then have gradually become toxic themselves. Like, God, there is this awful statistic where I think it was orcas, where orca females have learned. Now, don't quote, like, I'm not going to do this justice because there's like much more science behind this, but like the gist of this publication is that orca females have learned to not take care of their first offspring as much because they're so prepared for it to die. And that's because of breastfeeding or just nursing in general, because what bioaccumulates and stores all the toxins? Fat cells. Where are almost all of the fat cells on a female? In the mammaries, right? So the poor baby is getting like flooded with so much toxic material in the milk that most of them don't survive. Then, luckily, glass half full, the mom is essentially flushed of all of her toxins. So the second baby does very well. So, yikes, it's bleak.
That's fascinating. We, and you know what, we do both of those things to ourselves too. Like, I'm a big believer in getting away from scent based things in general. But you know,
Your poor
luckily
wife.
I've already well, no, she's not. I smell great, but I just I do natural ways to do that, and I try to avoid things that are heavily scented, like colognes and things like that, um, because we've seen that things that, like, first of all, people don't have to disclose what goes into fragrances. There's a lot of laws protecting that, which is super odd because there's very few things we buy where we're like, oh, you don't have to tell me what's in this. Um,
Ew, I didn't
the
know.
other one weirdly is like different types of alcohols, like that you don't have to necessarily disclose nutrition facts. Like, you can't just turn around a can of beer and see, you know, what were the ingredients that were used here and what
Ooh,
is the, you know, sugar content of the final product and things like that. Um, it's odd, right?
yeah.
But but even beyond that, that genetically, we're supposed to be attracted to the pheromones of someone that reflects a unique. I think it's like our bacterial profile and our basically our immune system's profile. It creates like a different smell. So it's the same reason why, again, it's another mechanism we have as humans to not be incestuous, is because when someone has a similar makeup of their immune system to us, we're not attracted to that. We're attracted to something very different. But then we mess with that by putting colognes and perfumes on, and then hey, someone is doing that while they're dating, and then we get serious, and then we get married, and then you find out, oh, I'm not actually attracted to the way that person
Huh.
smells, which that's
Makes
there's all sorts of reasons why marriages even can fall apart because of that exact same thing. And the same goes for birth control. Weirdly, like taking birth control makes you attracted to the immune system that is sort of not the one you're supposed to be attracted to. And then after you get off of birth control, it completely reverses. So there's all sorts of things that we're doing to ourselves with scents and with all these chemicals. And I think last time you and I talked about the same thing about I was talking a lot about grass-fed beef and the ways Andrea and I buy beef, and how again it's all the crap that you feed to your food, it turns into your food. And it's super obvious to see with things like factory farm beef, where they've got higher omega-6 than they have omega-3, and
right.
when you give them grass and pasture, they have a higher omega-3 content. They're actually better for our bodies. It's
Right.
we're doing all the same stuff to ourselves.
I mean, one of the biggest takeaways, honestly, like if I mean, granted, I don't have any right to talk about like birth control or any of that stuff, but I mean, just one of the most pleading requests I could make is please do not wear aluminum deodorant. So whether you participate in deodorants or not, or antiperspirants or whatever, just don't use aluminum, because chemically speaking, only as like a scientist do I have the right to say this, but like chemically speaking, like our armpits are very porous, right? That's why we just leak from them. So it's really easy for heavy metals like aluminum to be absorbed into our skin. Well, what is right next to our armpits? Breasts. So aluminum is a leading cause of breast cancer. So similar to those orcas that are just being inundated with like heavy metals, I mean, just all you ladies out there, or anyone that is transitioning to have a breast like component to their body. I mean, men too. I mean, like we get breast cancer. So like, just don't wear aluminum. Like, oh my goodness. Luckily, male bodied individuals don't have as much fatty tissue there. Well, speak for myself, quarantine 15, but prior to this, but just all things considered, just fatty tissues absorb heavy metals. All those lipids in there, all of that is just like a little vacuum sealed cottage cheese holder, and just holds all of that stuff. And I mean, it's really sad about like the orcas, but it's also a testament to how smart they are, that they're learning what this means, I guess, which is like dark. Like it's just really dark that they have to go through that. But the second baby always does really well because the mom's
Yeah.
flushed out.
Yeah. This is it's rare on this podcast. I like to take these opportunities to point out how I'm not perfect, because I really try to be like, oh yeah, I eat all the good foods and I do all that stuff, whatever. But I completely have aluminum antiperspirant in my cabinet right now that I use regularly. And the only reason I haven't thrown it out is because I'm super cheap. Because I had it, and then I learned about that, and I was like, oh, I shouldn't use that anymore. But I got to use it up now. But I will not. In your honor, I will throw that out, and I'll get some non-aluminum stuff, because you're right. It's stupid, but even someone like me who's so focused on health, even I have ones where I'm like, oh no, but I'm just gonna, I'll be fine. And really we should, be having a little more respect for ourselves and take the science seriously.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I
it's a
just
little
like that's
messed
a
up.
really easy change. Another really sneaky one. I had no idea about, like, you're right, like calories. No one puts calories on wine. Like that's really
Well,
interesting.
even
Yeah.
beyond, I mean, I think that even beyond calories, like sugar is the big
Yeah.
one. And I've noticed, like with myself, like I love a good boxed wine, man, because I don't have any
Bronzia.
taste in wine. And oh yeah, the best way to go. And I noticed that I think it has been impacting my sleep if I drink that at night, because it will spike you up with sugar right before you go to sleep, and then that will sort of burn up and mess with your glycemic index as you're asleep. But I can't look on that box and see how much sugar is in there. And I do that for every other food I eat. Like the sugar maniac, so I will look and see how much is in everything, and I can't with my alcohol. That's messed up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's also just thinking about what they can and can't tell you. I had no idea about the perfumes and colognes. It's really interesting. But like reef safe sunscreen, I think is really interesting as well, because not all reef safe sunscreens are reef safe, which is really interesting. So one of the low hanging fruits is that reef safe sunscreens are the ones that theoretically are waterproof, where if they don't come off you, they're not going to get into the water. Well, that's not how that works. It's not so much the ability to stick to you, but it's the heavy metals that are in there. So as unfortunate as it is, the best sunscreens for you are those like really gross, gooey white ones that just like snowman you on, you know, because those are the ones that don't have a lot of the really heavy like chemicals. And these poor corals are just like shot. So you don't want to watch out for like a lot of those. I mean, if it's like blatantly aluminum, it's blatantly zinc, like you got to watch out for these metals that, yes, they're probably not great for you either, but they're also not great for these poor smaller organisms at the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah, 100%. I had no idea actually. But then again, I'm actually not big on sunscreen, which I recognize that has its own inherent risks. But usually, like Andrea and I, our preferred way to do this, and by the way, this is because I have the ability to get out of the sun, and I don't work in the sun like a lot of people do, who absolutely need to be wearing sunscreen. But you know, we have the ability to be like, okay, well, we're not going to go out. Like when we're down in Florida, we're never out there in the middle of the day, and if we are, it's not more than 10 minutes, and you know, we're going to go out in the evening, and we're going to watch the UV and all that stuff. But next time that I need to invest in sunscreen for whatever reason, I'll have to text you first. I'll be like, hey, like what are the kinds that go on like toothpaste and just stay there,
right? Exactly.
So I could be more pale than I am already.
Like it's just unfortunate that the ones that make you look the worst are actually the best.
Yeah. Well, isn't that? I mean,
Right.
that's a lot of things in life, other than maybe like good health. Like good health, like you're eating well, you're drinking water, you're looking good. You know, so yeah, there's a few times.
Exactly.
This has been just a great episode of the Strangers Worth Meeting After Dark. I'm really glad you came back on, and honestly, you know, I think people are going to be excited about this episode. I certainly am, and you are welcome on the show anytime, because I have no shortage of questions for you, but we've both got to go about our lives now. So the only other thing I have to add for the listeners is that by the time this episode comes out, Andrea's new documentary, Newly Nomads, is going to be released, and that we've done it entirely free on YouTube. She put together this thing that deserves to be on Netflix and will be on YouTube because she wanted people to be able to find it and to watch it and to have it. And it is the story of our first year on the road living full time in the RV, and you really get to see like the goods and the bads of what that looks like and how we've made it work. And of course, she's a phenomenal filmmaker. So be sure to check that out on YouTube. If you go to at Wild Hicksons anywhere, you will find it, or the Wild Hicksons YouTube channel. You'll be able to watch the Newly Nomads documentary. Thank you to our sponsor, Track Farms, as always, for keeping us in CBD like you do. We appreciate it. And, of course, thank you to Ross for taking the time to be on the show, man. It's always so great catching up with you. I really look forward to next time we're in Florida and get to do this in person. And it's just excellent to have you on the show and to be your friend, man.
I mean, it's so great that, yay, Zoom. So hopefully we can do this again before you make it back to Florida, because I have so much fun talking to you. So literally anytime.
I was hoping you'd say that. Because I'm like, I don't know if we're going to be back there until November, and that's too long to go without a good shot of Ross knowledge. So,
please.
So you are on Instagram at SoRossum.
Yep.
I know how to say that this time.
Yeah.
So go check him out if you want some more of that good stuff. I will take the links you've sent me and I'll put them in the episode description if people want to go play with some of those things. Anything else that I missed? Is that the episode, Ross?
Yeah,
Did we do it?
one of the last. I know that we talked about like a lot of gloom and doom stuff, so I want to end on this awesome positive note. So I'm putting one last link in our chat just as like a wonderful end of the program, that, believe it or not, just within the last few weeks, 2 birds, seabirds, that were thought to be extinct have been rediscovered, which is really exciting. So that's why I'm wearing my puffin shirt, is to represent. I'm my little stud puffin right now. So I know it's a pretty foul shirt. Terrible. But
oh no.
Oh no, oh god. But
we've hit that point.
Yeah. So I just wanted to end on like such a positive note that like this is such a fun podcast. I love hanging out with Tyler. I'm so glad I got to meet his wonderful wife. I have so much fun hanging out with all of you as well. I put some great links that Tyler will reference. And then just as a end all positive note, that yes, a lot of gloom and doom is happening. That is largely humans' fault, but nature has a way of recovering, and it's awesome scientists and citizen scientists like all of you that have helped confirm that 2 extinct birds aren't actually extinct. What a wonderful thing to be wrong about, right?
That is great. And as always, sharing is caring. So share out some of this knowledge with your friends. And yeah, I mean, if you're just listening and you didn't watch the video version, you should at least go to YouTube to peek at Ross's puffin shirt that he's got on. I did notice that you wore that special. And you've also got the I think it's a sperm whale picture behind you, which is very on brand for you. So well done you. All right, everybody, thanks very much for listening. Again, thanks to Track Farms, and as always, we will see you on the next episode.